Swastiastu. Hello everyone, thank you for the time you have given to our group. We would like to explain the material grouping students in the course of teaching English as a foreign language. Before we start, I would like to introduce my group. We are from group 4. I am Kadek Juliartini from English Education in Denpasar. And then my friend Nyoman Adi Wiraguna from English Education in Denpasar. Then Gusti, Agung, Petra, Alma, Jaya from English Education in Denpasar. And then last one is Wayan, Piona, Gitawati from English Education Bangli. And for this topic, there are two. The first is different group, and the second is organizing pair work and group work.
Thank you for the time that given to me. Now I'm Petra Alma for B class will present the first material. As you can see on the slide, it's about whole class teaching. What is whole class teaching? It is teaching learning process in which teacher teach a similar lesson to the whole class. The entire class is treated as a large group and it's also known as a whole class instruction. This is the simplest approach for teaching. The teacher has only one lesson to prepare, so both time and effort is saved. The main characteristic of this kind of teaching is that the lesson is planned for students with a different level of ability in the class. In addition, in whole class teaching, it is rather easier to record student progress and keep good disciplines. And then about the advantage of whole class teaching. Number 1, give a sense of belonging. It is much easier for students to share an emotion such as happiness or amusement in a whole class setting. And secondly, allow for whole group interaction. And the last, good for control. It is suitable for activities where the teacher is acting as a controller. It is especially good for giving explanation and instruction, where smaller group would mean having to do this thing more than once. Then about the disadvantage of whole class teaching. First, it may not encourage students to take responsibility for their own learning. It means that whole class teaching favors the transmission of knowledge from teacher to students rather than having students discover things or research things for themselves. The second, it is not the best way to organize communicative language teachings or specifically task-based sequence, which is communication between individuals is more difficult in a group of 20 or 30 persons than it is in a group of 5 or 4 persons. In smaller groups, it is easier to share material, speak quietly and less formally, and make good eye contact. And the last, difficult to manage activities, it is more difficult having the whole class working together to actually manage the activity. Next, the second material is about sitting whole group class. It's defined as the physical setup of chair, table, and presentation in a classroom that can influence the learning process. There are many different ways of sitting classes when they are working as a whole group. And as you can see on the slide, we pick 3 ways like number 1, orderly rows. One of the most common is to have students sit in orderly rows. The teacher has a clear view of all students and the student can all see the teachers. Lecturing is easier with such a sitting arrangement since it enables the teacher to maintain eye contact with the people he or she is talking to. Orderly rows allow the teacher to work with the whole class. In addition, the disadvantage of using the orderly rows can be not well organized. The teacher will have difficulty moving from student to another student. And the second is circle and horseshoe. 2 other common sitting arrangements are circle and horseshoe. These are especially appropriate for smaller groups. With horseshoe and circle sitting, the classroom is more intimate place and the potential for students to share feelings and information through talking, eye contact, and expressive body movement like eyebrow raising, a shoulder shrugging, and etc. is far greater than when they are sitting in rows. The disadvantages using this setting are not favorable to say student and may have difficult to control behavior. And the last is separate tables. Separate tables setting is especially useful in mixed ability classes, where different groups of students can benefit from concentrating on different tasks or design for different ability levels. And a huge advantage of separate table is that group work is easy to arrange and easy for the teacher to work at one table while the other group continue their work. Next, the third is about students on their own. At the opposite of the from whole class grouping is the idea of students on their own, working in a pattern of individualized learning. This can range from students doing exercise on their own class to situations in which teachers are able to spend time working with individual students or when students take charge of their own learning in self-access center. If we wish students to work on their own in class, we can, for example, allow them to read privately and then answer the question individually. We can also ask them to complete worksheet or writing tasks by themselves. And last, we can give them worksheet with several different tasks and allow individuals to make their own decision about which tasks to do. Next, about the advantage of individual learning. First, it allows the teacher to respond to individual students. If the class are working as individual anyway, then if someone has a particular question by the teacher, talking with them at a one-to-one basic, they are not going to disturb everyone else, whereas they were working in the whole class. And then the second, it is likely to be less stressful for students than performing in a whole class setting or talking in pairs or groups. And the third, allow students to become more self-reliant. Obviously, when they are working on their own, they are going to have to produce their own answer, and that will help them with their self-reliance. And last, it can be a way to restore peace and quiet to a noisy and chaotic classroom. About the disadvantage of individualized learning. First, it doesn't help a class develop a sense of belonging, which is it doesn't encourage cooperation in which students may be able to help and motivate each other. And the second, when combined with giving individual students different tasks, it means that a great deal more talk and material preparation than whole class teaching involved. When we work with individual students as a tutor or resource, it takes much time than interact with the whole class. And last, little chance of students' interaction. Okay, that's all the material I'll deliver to you and will be continued by my friend Julie.
Pair work. Students can work together to practice language, study text, conduct language research, or participate in information gap activity. You can write conversation, read text predictably, or share what you hear or see. And the advantage of pair work are: the first, it greatly increases the speaking time of students in class, and two, it gives students to work and interact independently without the necessary guidance of teacher in encouraging learners' independence. And third, it gives the teacher time to work with a pair or two while the other student continue to work. And four, it's quick and easy to organize. And then the disadvantage of pair work is frequently are very noisy, and some teacher and student dislike this. Teacher in particular worry that they will lose control of their class, and two students in pair can often veer away from the point of an exercise, talking about something else completely, often in their first language. The chances of misbehavior are greater with pair work than in a whole class setting. And third, it's not always popular with students. Many of whom feel they would rather relate to the teacher as individual than interact with other learners who may be just as linguistic weak as they are. And 4. The actual choice of paired partner can be problematic. Groupwork. We can also divide students into large groups as this enable them to complete a range of tasks for which pairing work in insufficient or inappropriate. Students can write a group story, role play a situation with 5 people. You can prepare presentation or discuss topic and make collective decision. You can watch, write, or perform a video sequence, and we can provide individual students in the group with different verses from a poem for the group to regroup. And the advantage of group are like pair work. It dramatically increase the number of talking opportunity for individual students. And 2, unlike pair work, because there are more than 2 people in the group personnel, relationships are usually less problematic. There is also greater chance of different opinion and varied contribution than in pair work. 3, it encourages better skill of cooperation and negotiation than pair work, and yet is more private than work in front of the whole class. 4, it promotes learner autonomy by allowing students to make their own decision in the group without being told what to do by the teacher. And 5, although we don't wish any individual in group to be completely passive, nevertheless, some students can choose their level of participation more readily than in a whole class or pair work situation. The disadvantage of group work are it's likely to be noisy. Some teachers feel that they lose control, and the whole class feeling which has been painstakingly built up may dissipate when the class is split into smaller entities. And second, not all students enjoy it since they would prefer to be the focus of the teacher attention rather than working with their peers. Sometimes students find themselves in uncongenial group and wish they could be somewhere else. And third, individual may fall into group role that become fossil, so that some are passive whereas others may dominate. And four, group can take longer to organize than pairs beginning and ending group work activity, especially where people move around. The class can take time and be chaotic, bringing the change, deciding when to group or pair student, when to teach a whole class, or when to let individual students learn. It independently depends on a number of the factors. The task. If we want to give students a quick change to think about an issue which we will be focused on later, we may put them in bus group where they have a chance to discuss or buzz the topic among themselves before working with it in a work grouping. And variety in a sequence, a lot depends on how the activity fit into the lesson sequence we have been following and are likely to follow next. If much of our lesson teaching has involved whole class grouping, there may be a pressing need for pair work or group work, if much of our recent work has been boisterous and active based on interaction between various pairs and groups. The advantage of having different student grouping is that they help to provide variety, the sustaining motivation. The most crucial to our decision about what grouping to use is the mode of our student change. The group of a class can be good way to change its mode when required. If they appear to have little to say or contribute in such a setting, we can put them in group to give them a chance to re-engage with the lesson. If on the other hand group appear to be losing their way or not working consequently, we can call the whole class back together and redefine the tasks, discuss problems that different groups have encouraged, or change the activity.
So I'm going to continue the presentation with the material called organizing pair work and group work. So the first one is how make that pair work and group work. So you must invest some time and discuss on, and it must form a group on this method and try to grouping favorite activities and comparing it with other students. In this method, we must use some kind of student favorite activities like music, sports, or film, or whatever. So we can we know what the students are interested in, and we can compare it with other students. So we can see the different favorite activities between one student and another. And then after that, it's how creating pairs and group. So the first one is friendship, like it's called friendship. So student in pairs or group, make sure that we put friends and friends. So like it's called friendship. So we must put the student with their own friend. So it can be improving their interested in, so it can improve in their group and searching for a task or whatever the activities in the class. So maybe this method is one of the most effective method in this organizing project and group. And then the streaming is grouping students based on their ability and have a mixture of weaker and stronger. So in this method, we must mix student ability, which means it's not always friend and friends, but you can mix it with everyone. I mean, so it's called like their ability and have a mixture, which means we must put maybe one or two people that students that have a weaker and a stronger ability in this group, so it will be equal in the one group. And then change, grouping students not based on their ability, just random groups. So this method is actually like a change, like it's called. So when you put a random student in grouping, so there might be a disadvantage for this method. So maybe in one group there are a lot of students that have a stronger ability, and then the other group have a lot of students of weaker ability. So it's the grouping is not going to be equal, but it is one of the must try method because we can see the ability of the student by randoming there in one group. And then the task, it can contain student interested activities It's determine who works with whom. So in this method, we can make a task that contain students' interested activities, like I said before, in the making it work. So what student favorite activities, we can survey it from the beginning, and then we can make it depends on their interested activities, and then we can make it the task like they want it to be, and they can work with who and whom. And then the last one is changing groups. This method starts with pairs, then in group of 4, and then in group of 8, or over, or like 20, 12, like that. So we can grow the group ups by changing groups, and then we can maybe wider the topics or wider the tasks to see what the students' ability can do with the organizing fireworks and groupworks. So that's it, my material, and the presentation going to be continued by Piona.
Hello everyone, I'm Piona, and in this part I'd like to explain about procedure for fireworks and group work, and also about troubleshooting. So let's watch this video more. Procedure for firework and group work. As we know, the role as teacher is not finished after we determine the part of each group of students. So we also have to monitor every development or every group that occurs in the group work process. There are 3 parts in the group work process. The first is before group work, and the second is during the group work, and the last one is after the group work or fireworks. Well, we continue to the first part, that is before the group work. Before the firework, but before we give assessment to group of students, we might give them instruction, make them more enthusiastic and excited. We have to give them an idea of how they should work together and when they should complete their tasks. The success of firework or group work task is often helped by giving students a time when the activity should finish and then sticking to it. This helps to give them a clear framework to work within. The important thing about instruction is that the student should understand and agree on what the task is. To check that, we might ask them to repeat the instruction. So we can give instruction first and then make them to repeat the instructions. Next part is during the firework. An alternative procedure is often referred to as monitoring. This is where we go around the class watching and listening the specific fires and group leader to help them with the task or to collect example of what they are doing for later comment and work. For example, we can stay with a group for a period of time and then intervene if and when we think it is appropriate or necessary, always bearing in mind what we have said about the difference between accuracy and fluency work. While students are working in pairs or group, we have a number of options. We could, for instance, stand at the front or the side of the class or at the back or anywhere else and keep an eye on what is happening, noting who appears to be stuck, disengaged, or about to finish. When students are working in pairs or group, we have an ideal opportunity to work with individual students whom we feel would benefit for our attention. We also have a great chance to act as observer, picking up information about student progress and seeing if we will have to troubleshoot. But whoever we monitor intervention or take part in the work of a fire or group, it is vital that we do so in a way that is appropriate to the student involved and to the tasks they are involved in. Last part, after group work. When pairs or group work stop working together, we need to organize feedback. We want to let them discuss what occurred during the group work session and where necessary. Add our own assessment and make correction. Where pair work or group work has formed part of a practice session, our feedback might take them form of having a few files or group work quickly demonstrate the language they have been using. We can then correct it if and when necessary, and this procedure will give both the student and the rest of the class good information for future learning and action. So after the group works finish, we can give our feedback and also give all student or group a chance to demonstrative their work that have been finished. And finally, it is vital to remember that constructive feedback on the content of student work can greatly enhance student future motivation. Well, let's go to the second material, that is troubleshooting. When we monitor files and group during a group work activity, we are seeing how well they are doing and deciding whether or not to go over and intervene. But we are also keeping our eyes open for problems which we can resolve either on the spot or in future. Well, in a troubleshoot, there are two often problems when students do a group or pair works. The first is finishing first, and the second is awkward group. So let's go to the first problem, that is finishing first. Finishing first. A problem that frequently occurs when students are working in pairs or group is that some of them finish earlier than others and show clearly that they have enough time of the activity and want to do something else. We need to be ready for this and have some way of dealing with the situation. One way of avoiding the problems we have mentioned here is to have a series of challenging tasks related extension for early finishers, so that when a group has finished early, we can give them an activity to complete while they are waiting. This will show the student that they are not just being left to do nothing. When planning group work, it is a good idea for teachers to make a list of task-related extension and other spare activities that first finishing group and pairs can be involved in. Even where we have set a time limit on pair and group works, we need to keep an eye open to see how the students are progressing at group work and pair works. Well, the second problem is awkward group. When students are working in pairs or group, we need to observe how well they interact together. Even where we have made our best judgment based on friendship or streaming, for example, it is possible that apparently satisfactory combination of students are not ideal. Some parents might find it impossible to concentrate on the tasks in hand and instead encourage each other to talk about something else, usually in their first language. Some weak students may be lost when pair or group with stronger classmates. In such situation, we might need to change the pair or groups. We can separate best friend for pair work. We can put all the high status figure in one group so that students in other group don't have to defer to them. We can stream groups or reorganize them in their ways so that all group members get the most from the activity. One way of finding out about groups in particular is simply to observe, noting down how often each student speaks. If 2 or 3 observations of this can reveal or continuing pattern, we can take them kind of action suggested above. So it's so important to know about the student ability. Well guys, that's all the material for me, and thank you.
That's all the material we can explain. Thank you, and Om Santi 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 Om.